In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a few hyperlink rollover button images with a free open source photo editing software called the Gimp 2.6. By the way, the Gimp 2.6 can be downloaded free of charge at www.gimp.org. Then I'm going to explain how to create a web page, placing these images within it, linking to various websites, and with some simple JavaScript coding, make these buttons come to life and work the way we want them to, as hyperlinks. So let's get started. For starters, we need to create a folder on our desktop by doing a right-click, New, Folder. And we want to give this folder a name. Let's call it Index. Double-click that folder, and within this folder, we're going to create a subfolder. And we want to give it a name. Call it Assets. And having our folders created on our desktop, assuming that you have already downloaded and installed the Gimp 2.6 to your computer, let's open that up. And the Gimp opens, and when the Gimp opens up, we're going to go to the left corner, click File, go to Create, Buttons, and for this tutorial, we're going to create some round buttons. And an option dialog window opens up, and our first option is text, and this is going to be the text that's going to appear on the button, so let's change that. And our next option is our font size. Not only does this control the size of our font, but it also determines the size of our button as well. And our font style, another window opens up, and we have many to choose from. We'll just pick one. And our next options is our color options. And for right now, we're just going to be concerned with the first three. And our first one is our upper color. And for this tutorial, I'm going to create a blue button. And it is the upper color, so therefore it is the highlights of the button. So I'm going to go with a light blue. And I'm going to also save my notation. My notation is, it tells exactly what this color tone is, and by saving this notation, and when we create a web page, if we put it in our comment, and if we need to create another button with a completely different name, we'll have our notations as reference to creating a button with the same color tints. Hit OK, and then the next one is our lower color, which our lower color is our sort of our shaded area or darker blue. Right about there. Save our notation. And we have our last color is our text color. It could be any color you want, but I'm going to stay within the blue and make this a really dark blue. Save our notation and OK. Then our next three color options is for our next button that we're going to create is our action button, which will be an event handler, mouse over or on click. When you do a mouse over, say for instance the cursor passes over the first button, you want it to change colors to this. And for the first is the upper color, and I'm going to still stay within the blue. And noting that this was the first color, and I want my color to be lighter than that because I want the button to lighten up when the cursor passes over it. Save my notation. Hit OK. Then the next one is my lower color. And on this one, the lower color was this, so I want it to be a little bit lighter than that color. Save my notation. And then my last was my text color. My text color was a dark navy, so I want it to be a lighter color than that because I want the button to lighten up. Save my notation. OK. Next two options is the padding X and the padding Y. This is the space that's going to be in between the text and the inner border of our button. And since this is fairly a large button, I want the padding on the vertical and horizontal axis to be about 15 for each. And then our bevel width, the bevel width is an optical illusion that makes the button appear that it's either protruding or standing off the page or being pressed into the page. And this is a fairly large button, so I'm going to create about 25. Then our next option is our round ratio. And since we are creating round buttons, I could run this down and it would actually be a square button with round corners, or I could run it really high and it would be a oval shaped button with really sharp corners. For this tutorial, I'm going to set it at about a 2.0. And then our last options are check boxes. And these are the buttons that we are going to create. The first one is the button that's just going to sit on the page and look pretty. And then our next one is going to be our active button. And it is going to be an event handler button. It's going to change from these tones to these tones. And then, of course, our last button is going to keep these same color tones, but what it's going to do is going to swap out the top left and bottom right corners to give it an optical illusion that the button has been pressed into the page. And I'm going to hit OK, and it will create all three of these buttons simultaneously. Our first button that we created was the center one, so I'm going to go ahead and just click here and get the other two out of the way for right now. And I'm going to go and click File, Save As, and our window opens up where we're going to save it. And we want to save it in the file that we created on our desktop, so our location is going to be on our desktop. And that folder that we created was named Index. I'm going to double click it. And then we had a subfolder inside of it called Assets. This is where we want to save all of our images. And we need to give this image a name, so we're going to call it RCCC1 and give it an extension of PNG. And a save option window opens up. And these are pretty much self-explanatory, except for I'm going to explain what interlacing and gamma is. Interlacing is basically after we create our images and they're on our web page, and when they're downloaded, instead of the image coming in one line at a time, we're going to have them come in as a group of pixels, and it'll be clarified, and it looks more like it's focusing in. So I'm going to choose interlacing. Interlacing is actually more necessary for large images, but I prefer to use it on all my images just for self-assurance. And then gamma is basically for a PNG. What it does is when we create our images with certain color tones, it ensures that when this image is downloaded, it'll come in pretty much in the same range of color tones. So we're going to use it, save it in gamma, and then we're going to just hit save. And now we've got to save the other images. I'm going to maximize it. And this was our action button, our active button, and we'll click Save, File, and then click Save As. And you can see it's in the same location. As long as the Gimp stays open, we don't have to go through the same process of the desktop, index, and then assets. It opens back up in the same location. And of course we need to give it a different name than what we have here. Instead of having to type everything, I'm just going to click this one time. It brings it up here, but I am going to change that number 1 to a number 2, and then I'm going to click Save. And our options remain the same. And then for our final image, I'll maximize it and go to File, Save As. It's in the same location. I'm going to click this one time, and then I'm going to change the 2 to a 3. And if you notice that the dot PNG was taken out, and if I would save this right now, it would not be in a PNG image. It'd actually go to a GIMP's default, which is a XCF, and it is actually a FCF is good, especially when you're working on a project and it's really long and you need to take a break and save where your process is, and you can save it, and then when you open it back up, it'll open it back up in the same place that you left off. But if you want to save it as a PNG, it will not unless that dot's there. So we're going to make sure the dot's there, and we're going to hit save, and our options remain the same, and we have saved it. And for the purpose of from not getting confused, what we're going to do, we're going to close out these buttons, but we're not going to close the GIMP out completely. So I'm going to close this one out, close that one out, and if I close another one, it would probably close the GIMP, so I'm going to leave this one open. And I've got two more buttons to create, so I'm going to go back up to File, Create, to Buttons, and Round Buttons. Now our options are still the same. The only thing different that we got to change here is the name of the button, and we're going to name it, and then we're going to click OK. And what this does, creates these three buttons simultaneously. Spread them out so I can see what I'm doing. Let's see. And this was the first button that we created, and I'm going to maximize it. File, Save As. It's in the same location, but we have to give it a completely different name. And we'll call it GIMP1 PNG. Hit Save. Options remain the same. And our other one. Okay, and we're going to maximize. And this was our active button for this button. And we'll hit File, Save As, and I'm going to click this one time, bring it up here, and change that number 1 to a number 2. Click Save. Options remain the same. And then for our final button, sometimes you got to click these things twice to get them to come up. And maximize, File, Save As, and we're going to click this one here, brings it up here, and then we'll change that 2 to a number 3. And now I'm going to close out some of these so it's just less confusing. I don't want to close them. I don't want to close the GIMP out completely. And then I'm going to leave one open, which it leaves that one. So I'm going to create one more group of buttons for our rollover images. And our window comes open, and our options still remain the same, and we want to change the name. And click OK. I'll bring the first image up, maximize it, go to File, Save As, and in the same location, giving this one a different name. Maximize, File, Save As, that one time, and then I'm going to change that number 1 to a number 2. And then our final image, which was our compress button. And we'll change the name a little bit. And save. And there, that's pretty much it for the GIMP. So we can just pretty much close out the GIMP. Our next process in this is a simple text editor will do just fine. So we'll use Notepad, and I'll go ahead and put in the opening and closing HTML tags. And let's go ahead and give it a title. Okay, I've got the opening and closing tags for our web page, and we need to put some content in between the body tags. I'm going to set up an anchor, a hyperreference link into a website. And the first button that we created was the RCCC, so I want to reference it to the website. And we'll close this out. And of course I could put RCC right here, and when this web page is created, this text will be a hyperlink that will refer to this website. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we created rollover button images, and this is where we want to put our images. So I'm going to give it an image tag in the source, and the location was in the subfolder that we created. And that first image that we created was RCCC1, and it had the extension of PNG. And of course we need to give this image an alternative attribute, an alt tag. And this is for basically if a user has their on their browser, they have their images turned off, or if it's a visually impaired person that's using the screen reader, it'll read this part. So we need to give it a slight description of what this image is, and it is the RCC button image. Now at this point, this is where our JavaScript comes into play. This is simple JavaScript coding. Of course, it can be done several ways. This is just a simple way of doing it. And for our first event to happen, let's do a mouse over on this one. On mouse over. And we want it to know the source, but we want to give it a focus first. And we'll focus this source, and it's going to be equal to, and I've got to use a single quotation here instead of a double, because I've already started with a double, and this is going to be like it's nested, and of course it's going to end. So I've got to use single quotation, and that where the resource of where it's located, and we'll put that right here. So that is that first image that we created. No, it's the second one. The second image we created. So it was, we want to pull that, and it was the image of RCCC number 2, which was the rollover button image, and it had the extension of PNG. And we will end it with a single quotation, and then in the whole in the other quotation we'll do a double. Now this is our first event handler, and what it does is when the mouse goes over, it calls this image, and of course we've also got to tell it what to do when the mouse leaves the image. So we're going to do another event handler, on mouse out, and it's going to be equal to I'm going to focus the source, and it's going to be equal to, I've got to use a single quotation here, And that was the first image we created, because when the mouse leaves, it's got to go back to the way it was. So we set the source as the subfolder, and the first image was RCCC number 1, and give it extension, and then of course we're going to close it with a single quotation and then double quotation. And then of course our next event handler is going to be an on-click event, but I prefer to use an on-mouse down, and the difference between the two is on-click, you have to click and then release the click before the event takes place, whereas an on-mouse down, the event takes action the moment that you click the mouse. So I'm going to do an on-mouse down event, and of course I want to draw the focus on the source. It equals to single quotation, and that third image that we created, and the location was in the assets subfolder, and its name was RCC 3, and extension was PNG. Single quotation, double quotation. Now it's very easy to make mistakes when you're writing long code, and it's best to check it out, and if you do make mistakes, you can always go back and correct it. Okay, we've created our first line of code for our first rollover button image, but we've got two other button images there that need to be placed here as well. And there's a simple little process that we can do. We can just go and copy this line of code. I'll go to the very end and hit enter. So I'll give me a space here, and I'm going to hit paste. Now of course I don't want the same thing, so I'm going to have to go and change a few things here. And the first was the anchor of where the website where it was anchoring to. Let me just maximize this first. And the second image that we created was the Gimp, so I'm going to change this part so the website will refer to the gimp.org. And the first image that we created was Gimp, and we gave it an alternative attribute. It can't be the same, so we're going to have to change that as well. And instead of having to type everything, we can just copy this part and change each one of these to where it says Gimp. And we're going to go ahead and hit enter, and I'm going to hit paste. Well, no, I need to go ahead and copy this line of code because I've already did a copy and a paste, and all I'll get was the single word Gimp. So I'm going to hit copy, and then I'll go back and paste this line of code and go in and alter it a little bit. And of course our third button that we created was the button Google, so I want to go to the Google search engine, so I'll put in google.com, and of course I need to change all my image assets to what the name of that button image was. So it was named Google. The first one was named Google 1. I want to change the alt to it as and let's just copy this so it keeps us from having to retype everything throughout our code. Change this one say Google number 2. And then our last part of it was right here. And that pretty much does it for that line of code for the rollover button images. Now we've got to, the next process is to, now that we have our anchors, our images, and our simple JavaScript code, it's time to convert this notepad into a web page. And to do so, we're going to click File, Save As, and our Save dialog window opens up. And of course, we want to save it in the folder that we created in the beginning on our desktop, and the location is on our desktop. Now we find our folder and double click it. And of course, we don't want to save it in our assets folder, and the reason being is we want to save it right here because it's going to be right here, and it's going to call to the assets folder and go inside and pull those images. So we're going to create our web page right here, and we're going to give it a name, and we'll call it index, and give it an extension of HTML. And of course, we want to make sure we save this as all files, and we'll click Save. Now that it's been saved, we can minimize this and go to our folders that we created on our desktop. I'm going to double click, and there's our index HTML file. We're going to give it a double click, and our button images are on that web page. And as soon as we mouse over these button images, they do change with the mouse over event handler. I'm going to click one, and it changes again to a press button, and then I'm going to release that, and it goes to the RCC website. Click back, and we're back to our web page. I'm going to go over to Gimp and click it, and it goes to the Gimp 2.6 download page. Click back and go to the Google button, click, and it goes to the Google search engine. This has been my tutorial on how to demonstrate how to create hyperlink rollover button images with a free open source photo editing software called the Gimp 2.6, and how to create a web page placing these buttons in it, and with some simple JavaScript coding make these buttons work the way we want them to. My name is Randy Helms, and thanks for watching.